girl, oh little old me. Well, don't let me out of your sight. Oh, I'm just a girl, all pretty and petite. Oh, so don't let me have any rise. Oh, ready of the year.
Radhe Radhe. Welcome to Off the Altar, a Hare Krishna feminist podcast. My name is Kadamba Mala Devi Dasi, and I will be your host. Today is February 1st, 2021, the official appearance day of the podcast. Well, this is pretty exciting. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous. I'm pretty nervous. This project and the topic of this project is pretty controversial in the devotee world. That's for sure. I had the idea for some time, but kind of didn't really have the time or energy to get the whole project moving. If you know me, then you know I have about 1 million different things going on at one time, and starting a podcast was definitely not at the top of my agenda. However, it only took one Facebook thread to really light the match and get me started on this little podcasting journey. What's that old saying? Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Okay, so I wouldn't say I was scorned necessarily, but I was definitely disturbed that it seemed like there are still devotees out there stuck in some relatively antiquated thinking and throwing Prabhupada uvachas out there into the ether to justify all kinds of toxic mentalities. Once I got the Instagram going, I actually had some regrets. Like, do I really have the time and energy to do this? I don't even know what I'm talking about. What will my tiny lady body brain do? But after some interactions with devotees on the Instagram page, both those in female and male bodies, I realized that there's such a need for this space and that I would be doing a disservice by giving it up. And that's kind of the complete opposite of what bhakti is about. I mean, right? But enough about that. Let's get to our very first guest. Keli Lalita Devi Dasi was first introduced to Eastern philosophy and kirtan as a child at the Vivekananda Vihar in the foothills of the Catskill Mountains, where her mother dabbled in spiritual life. She went to Waldorf School and was heavily involved in punk and hardcore throughout her adolescence. At 19, she moved into the Hare Krishna ashram and joined 108, which unified her diverse interests of music and meditation. She is the mother of 3 grown children and has spent the last 18 years teaching yoga asana, philosophy, and recently rejoined 108, the band which most allows her to express spiritual life in her best way, loudly and filled with emotion. She also leads kirtan and owns and operates Mantralogy, a record label which supports sacred music from all the world's traditions. I first encountered Keli through her solo endeavor, Project Kate, a soft, girly, emo acoustic album that went straight to my heart. I have been friends with Keli for more than 20 years now, and have only recently become closer with her. Thanks, #Rona. Here's our conversation from January 3rd, where we discussed a broad spectrum of topics related to feminism and devotee culture. Enjoy. Okay, so hi, Keli Lalita. Welcome to Off the Altar, a Hare Krishna feminist podcast. I don't know really what that means yet, so it should be interesting. But thank you for being our first
No problem.
guest.
I'm happy to do it.
So I think a really great place to start, I'd rather skip the part where, we do the long introduction of, who you are, where you came from. I mean, obviously you're a devotee of Lord Krishna, or else I probably wouldn't have asked you to talk about feminism as in relation to being in, the devotee sphere. So I think maybe just starting with how you see yourself in relation, maybe just to feminism as a general, like philosophy, and then maybe just how that relates to when you joined as a devotee and, kind of like that journey. I don't know, that's kind of a broad question, I know.
No. I mean, I think kind of going in an opposite direction, which is that I joined the temple in 1990, 91. And at the time, I was actually at the New School for Social Research and studying feminist theory.
Hmm.
And and at, and so I was devoting like every second of my life to reading feminist texts and all of that. And I mean, it was just, it wasn't, it was born out of the necessity of my life, you know, just because of there was less opportunity for me and there was different things asked of me. And I came from a family with a lot of brothers, and my relationship to things around the house and this and that were all really different. So I was just naturally drawn toward trying to understand how I could have a place in the world where I felt okay, basically. It wasn't like, you know, people think that feminism is this like castrating bitch thing, but it's really just about like breaking even. It's actually about breaking even. So I was trying to figure out how I could do that. And in the midst of that, I had always had an attraction to a spiritual path. And so I kind of came upon the spiritual path of Krishna consciousness in the version of the ISKCON, no, International Society for Krishna Consciousness version. And it was kind of a conundrum for me because the first text you read is the Bhagavad Gita, and the first, right in the second chapter, verse 17, you get like the brakes get put on you, because there's this total indication in that text that you are less.
And that's
And
the first, one of the first places where Prabhupada says, has the, where he says
and
something
it's in the
about,
text. It's
yeah, yeah.
actually in the Sanskrit text too. It says striya, which means women. So you're
Hmm.
kind of like just going like hook, line, and sinker. You know, I loved kirtan, I loved prasad, I loved everything about it. And then there's this like, you know, this thing of like, how can I sign myself up for something and commit to be a second class citizen?
So
And it
what it,
was,
what was your first, like, do you remember how you first responded to that? You know, did you ask someone, you know, what does this mean, or how did that go?
I mean, I did, and I was angry about it because I was angry that I had to once again deal with this. So you have this
Mm-hmm.
concept that you're joining this idealized society and it's all going to be perfect. And there was so much about it that felt really, really perfect and felt so attractive. And then and like a lot of us, you know, I was like 19 when I joined, so I got more into it because I love the music and I love the food, and you know, I wasn't so philosophical, but I started to study the Gita pretty much right away, and I came upon that. And you know, it's clear when you walk into, especially if you're studying feminist theory, and you walk into a temple, and all the women are sitting at the back, which is like this, you know, like this indication of being less, and that
Mm-hmm.
there's people that are more and there are people that are less. And so I, of course, I asked right away, and there were all kinds of sort of justifications for setting up a hierarchy in our society. And the first thing was, you're not this body, you're not this
Mm.
body, you're not this body. So I tried to latch onto that because I really wanted it to be true, and I wanted it to be real, and I wanted to be, you know, and I met a lot of Prabhupada's disciples who said, no, no, he was so loving toward the women. So I latched onto all of those good things, but there was just some inevitable stuff that I was still to this day never able to kind of set down, because our society is somewhat like the Amish of Hinduism. So we cling to certain conventions from late 1800s India that aren't even practiced in India now, you know, and they were they weren't even necessarily, I found out, historically Hindu practices. They were really from the time of the Mughals invading India,
Mm-hmm.
um, who brought a lot of Persian and Islamic culture, and we think of that as Indian culture, and it isn't even really.
Like
So,
cover, like covering your head. Like I've heard that a
like
lot.
covering
That
your head and
really,
covering your
yeah.
body,
Mm-hmm.
and the practice of men and women being separated. Like if you go all the way, luckily I've traveled a lot through India, and if you go all the way to the very south of India, where there's like more Dravidian culture and more like original Hindu culture that wasn't so much influenced by the Persians. You see these matriarchal dynasties, and the women aren't topless. And they have this like special side ponytail to indicate their royalty. And then, you know, there's some fantastic books like I think it's called The Last Empress of Jaipur. And she was like, hang on, I'm not actually from the Mughal part of this, because the families merged. I'm actually from Rajasthan. And yes, I will drive in my convertible. And no, I will not be in Purda. That was a convention which as new devotees, you know, we saw everything and thought, this is Indian culture, we should follow it.
Mm-hmm.
And we clung to it. And I think that it doesn't serve us at all anymore.
Sorry, I can't, I apologize for interrupting. There's so many, you're saying so many really great things. So like when you say like, oh, that doesn't serve us so much anymore, couldn't agree more. But if you could say more about that, like, why do you think that? What is there something specifically that comes to mind when you say that?
Yeah. So like, if you're going to present our philosophy and first of all throw out sort of one of our foundational understandings, which is we're not the body, and you're going to make a hierarchy based on bodies, you're not really being honest.
Right.
Because
right.
that's an ego, that's the desire of the ego.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the ahankara of like, I'm this body rather than I'm spiritual. So if you're going to make a decision based on bodies, then you have to, if you're honest, admit that you're just trying to lord over other members of society because you're attached to position, you're attached to fame, adoration, and distinction, which is exactly what we were told not to do. So if we're really going to follow our own philosophy, then we can't cling to those things that don't serve us. In addition to which, if we're going to have a society that is into outreach, which I have mixed feelings about, but is very much the Gaudiya Mat means the Gaudiya mission. So we're an offshoot of that. If we're going to be like a missionary movement, God help us, then do we want to attract women who are fine with being lower? And what will the world of those women be? And how does that actually create a balanced, intelligent, philosophical society? It doesn't. It attracts people that are probably damaged, which I probably was a little bit. So I was able to kind of like set that aside and live within this society where there was so much that was like kind of heaped against me, even the language of like, you're contaminated, you're off the altar.
Yeah.
Think about the word contaminated.
I know. Thank you. Yeah.
And poisoned.
Yeah.
So instead of any type of like natural honoring of like what the female body just happens to be or something like that, there's this concept that you are by nature like a contaminated vessel and less.
Yeah.
And this isn't totally unique to ISKCON. This is kind of like, if you look back at any ancient culture, you look at the Greeks, or you look at Persian culture, or you look at old European culture, there's this constant desire to suppress the sacred feminine and actual women and all of that. But I feel like we could do better. I feel like we could do better, and our philosophy supports that. So I just feel like, are we going to cap out and fall into this pit, of material ahankara, or are we ready to step above that and just allow those people that are qualified in whatever way they're qualified, regardless of their body, to do a service that suits them? And I was lucky that I did, but I wasn't beloved by the society. I was
right.
The only reason I was a little bit was because nobody else was doing any kind of dynamic preaching at the time when like Shelter and 108 were doing that. And otherwise, yeah, I was seen as a troublemaker and difficult, and I was constantly being called into offices and sat down and told to, and even directly asking, why are the boys sitting on the front lawn of the Philadelphia temple, completely in a pair of shorts, shirtless, and my entire body is covered. How is that okay? And the
Mm-hmm.
answer that was given was, they won't listen anyway. And I was like, okay, I get that, but that's just completely insane. Even though,
So let me play devil's advocate for a second, because I'm
okay,
trying to think of it from the perspective of those who might be listening,
yeah,
within a different mindset. So in terms of this idea that maybe our philosophy doesn't necessarily support this suppression, like at the root of it, how do you feel like varnashram plays into that, like this whole system that supposedly is better when women are protected by men? And I mean, and I'm not saying one way or the
yeah,
other. I'm just
yeah.
just going with like different things I've heard. And the idea that if you have the right type of man who is like the most dharmic and whatever, then it's easy for the woman, his wife, whatever, to then be submissive to him, and what that means, and this idea of chastity and all these things that we're like just automatically supposed to embody because we're women, and that's the right thing to do, just regardless however the man is. Like, how does that play into this idea then that really at the base, if we're not the body, then none of that should matter anyway? Like, what are your thoughts?
I mean, because, well, I think there's like, there's something that's called like reality and something that's called ultimate reality.
Right.
And I think they're
Right.
different. And I
Yeah.
think there's like ways that we're trying to like muddle through living in the material world, and varnashram is one of them. I mean, varnashram is, to me,
Mhm.
problematic. The word
Okay.
varna actually means color.
Hmm.
That's a problem. because
Right.
because if you read some of the texts, it's like the Shudras are like the blackest, and then
Mm-hmm.
it goes up to the Brahmins who are the lightest, and that's a problem because it's basing something on the body. And I
Mm-hmm.
think there was some muddling, and that's just a little bit of paraphrasing and actually taking. I was at a retreat with Bob Thurman, who was talking about the problem of varnashram and how varna is like this thing that's touted as this like perfect society, but within that idea, there's this very strong hierarchy. And I've actually heard one translation of the word Vaikunta, which means the total absence of hierarchy. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there is, I think, let's talk about it in terms of our society. So, and my own personal experience. I am delighted to have a fantastic husband who protects me. I do not have any issue with that. I feel like that phrase is used not at all to protect women,
Mm-hmm.
but used to make sure women don't do anything where they have a voice. I've seen it over and
Okay.
over because I've seen so many women in our society be, married to someone who's totally unsuitable for them, who might even be emotionally abusive. And when they leave the relationship, they're just basically cast aside by the society, not protected at all. No one tries to help them financially. No one's supportive of them. They're blamed for the breakdown of this, like, the ashram of marriage. And they're not in any way protected. That's where the protection is non-existent. But if
Mm-hmm.
someone wants to give class or someone wants to be a scholar of the Vedas, that's where the word protection is used as weapon against women.
Mm.
So I have a problem with it because most women are like, start protecting. I'm ready anytime now. Go for it. Protect away. Like it's not that so most of us are kind of by necessity, you know, just forging forward because we have no choice. I've seen so many women who are like divorced and they're working two jobs and they've got all the kids and all the financial responsibility, and their husband is their ex-husband is like in Vrindavan studying
Mm-hmm.
Sanskrit, and I'm like, where's the
Yeah.
protection?
Well,
You know,
yeah, not
that's
only
the
that,
issue
but
that I have
it's
with that word. It's weaponized against women when they have any type of agency within the society. That's where the word is used. It's really not used to do any type of, protecting means, to me, would mean that if that happened to a woman, the society would provide housing or childcare or food, or someone would bring, do that woman, help the woman with her laundry, or maybe help her fix her car, or like one of any of the above. But it's not. It's weaponized against women, and that's the problem that I have with it.
well, yeah, and then there's also those circumstances where then the woman is somehow, somehow has like, I mean, for lack of a better metaphor, I know it's not an exact, but like the scarlet letter of sorts of like, oh, she's a divorced woman. And then,
Yeah.
like you said, the man is like remarried and, doing whatever. And there's like no like societal stigma or consequence or backlash. I mean, and I'm not saying that there should be a consequence if you get divorced either. I don't mean to imply that, but I guess what I'm saying is that yeah, the inequality of
Well, we're just
what
looking
happened.
at we're looking at the double standard and how
Right, exactly.
how it
Yeah.
threads its way through Varnash, our interpretation of our Varnashram, our
Mm-hmm.
interpretation of, you know, Dharma, our interpretation of hierarchy, so
Yeah.
I think that's when, we kind of we might do well, and we could do well, and I envision a society where we could grow, where we stop looking at the bodies of these different souls, and we stop objectifying those souls in women's bodies and allow those souls who are temporarily in women's bodies to have agency over their body, over their service, over their, whatever it is that they, you know, would like to do as an offering to Krishna, rather than pigeonholing them into these roles, which really were like the popular roles of women in Calcutta, in Bengal in
Mm-hmm.
1896. It's
Right.
like, and even, if you even like look at like the roles of women in America, even in the, uh, into the 70s, when we were little girls, our moms couldn't have a mortgage without a man's signature. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's not like American society has nailed that, but it's just like, here we are in 2020, and I feel like we're all kind of ready to totally move past that. And I feel like it would be beneficial, and it would not it would not lead to the things that I've heard devotee men say, which is, oh, if you allow women to lead Bhagavatam class, they'll just be in bikinis all over Mayapur. It's like, somehow me studying philosophy and me being in a bikini aren't like related to each
Yeah,
other.
they
Like, I'm
don't.
not gonna suddenly, when I get into philosophy, I'm gonna just strip my clothes off. Like, it's totally illogical.
Right,
So,
right.
like, and in addition to which, I'm not there, and none of us are there, whatever our age or whatever our thing is, to be seen as this distraction and this object of enjoyment for men. It's not actually what we're here for. It's not what we're doing. So, and I've had this discussion, and I've had some pretty heated discussions where I say, can we just remove the objectification of women and allow them have agency? And it was kind of like, the answer to that was no.
With
So if you're
explanation
not
or
willing to do
without?
that, you're going to have a lot of problems. But if you were
Mm.
actually to see women not as objects of desire, sexual objects of desire, and this leads into the whole like thing of having to call 19-year-old girls Mataji. It's like,
Well, oh, well, I mean, and can we talk about that? Because I
I've
mean,
hated it from the beginning. I was like,
yeah.
why are people calling me? I'm literally a teenager. Like, why? I mean, and it's sweet. I mean, I saw the other day Haryashva wrote a message to my daughter, and he said, "Mother, you look so beautiful in that picture." And he kind of gets a pass
Right,
because
right.
well, because partially because he doesn't see women as objects, and he's never treated any of us like that. And
Hmm.
his relationship was really sincere with my, like, for me, I've always had that. But a lot of times it was sort of spit at me, like like I was just there in my
Right.
full sari with my head covered, just trying to like distract men from their japa. And that therefore I was
Hmm.
like a horrible mataji. So
Hmm.
I felt like a rejection of that. I'm like, can you just never call me that? Like, I don't. and there some people can, and it doesn't bother me, but just in general, like I just feel like it has such a negative taste from days of old where people were using that because they couldn't possibly talk to me like treat me as like a human being or as a devotee, and they had to call me that because I don't know what was going to happen, but it was
Yeah,
going to be extreme.
I think, and I think that the problem is that I don't think any of us, I say us like women, I mean, I can't speak for obviously all women, but I don't think that it's that we don't understand that what it's the root of why that term is used, right? That it's meant to be a term of respect. It's it's not meant to be an insult, but the problem is, just like you said, is that it
How it's
has been used that way, and it's not necessarily appropriate for every soul in a female body at all times. Like
well,
it's
there's
just
also like
not.
it's implying that in order to be a worthy female, you need to be a child bearer, which
Right.
it's
Right.
implying that you're just this baby factory in a way. And if you are, and people see you that way, then you won't be considered to be like pulling everyone from their spiritual path. And the other thing it points to a couple of other things too. And I'm reading Tulsi Das's Ramcharitmanas, which has got some of the same problems, which is, um, he was saying women are so fortunate because they aren't born into these lusty bodies and they don't look upon other women, which we know isn't necessarily true for all
Right.
people,
Mm-hmm.
and so they don't even have a problem with lust. So they're already higher and more easily drawn to bhakti, which may be a little true. I don't know, but the point is the texts are written for men, and they're never so there's this like that's like an inherent problem, but that's just a common problem of all society. I mean, if you look at ancient society and you're a mom trying to like raise children, or if you've been to India with 3 children and you're washing cloth diapers in a bucket and just trying to arrange getting to the goshala every day to get some milk to boil to put in a bottle so they can drink 1 bottle of milk, and it takes the entire day, you're probably
Mm-hmm.
not going to have time to do deep philosophical study. There was that practical thing.
It
So
sounds like perhaps you had experience with that. I don't know.
I was like, oh, I get why these texts were written for men. I wouldn't have time to read them. But now in the modern world, I had plenty of time to read them and study them. And in fact, it was what for me was, in some ways, the potential of becoming a teacher was like never offered to me. It was never there for me. And it was a shame. So there's just all these incredible imbalances that are like threaded into life in ISKCON, and I would have way less of an issue with all of that if they weren't perpetuated and weaponized against women.
Mm-hmm.
And like I feel like we could now look at the text and say, actually it's not really women's responsibility to completely be in charge of men's sexual desire and the issues with that. That's actually the man's job. They
Well,
should be
why?
working on that on their own. I'm over here studying, and my body is not an object of desire. It is my body, and I am the agent of that body. And so if you have a problem with that, you don't get to name me Mataji. You don't get to decide who I am or what my role is or anything. Like it's not really valuable. I don't think it really. And I also find it interesting that there are these like 4 or 5 and they're invited to do everything.
Wait, rewind. You froze. There's 4 or 5 what? Say it again.
There's all these other marvelous women who are not on the sanctioned list. And every time you are like, well, it's still a problem with women, they say, Janavi chants, Gauravani's mom teaches, Achyuta Gopi chants. And you're like, great. But there are a million other women who don't. And so it's kind of like when you're talking about Black Lives Matter and people go, I have a black friend. It's like,
right.
yeah, it's you're not getting to the heart of the matter, which is that this is not available for all women. And by the way, I love all those women, and I think they're
Oh
totally
yeah.
fine. I adore them. They're
But the thing is
brilliant.
too, with them, I mean, if you think, and obviously I don't want to talk about any of their stuff, but I know for a fact, anyone who's heard Mother Rukmini speak knows everything she went through, in the early days in terms of then like where she is now, like how
Right,
different that is. And then even, Chuta Gopi, she's had her own struggles just being, besides the fact that she's a woman, but being in a Black body, like,
right,
so it's not even that those women that they name who now become like these trophy tokens, like, oh, look at these women that
right.
are
They had
we
to,
allow,
they
that
had to
we
literally
allowed.
be perfect.
Yeah, yeah,
They had to
yeah.
be perfect.
And
Like,
even then it wasn't easy because they're
right, it
women.
wasn't. No,
Yeah.
they earned it.
So, yeah.
And
So, I mean,
but my point is, like, then we have, like, I think all of these things should just be available to who's ever qualified, and they're uber
mhm,
qualified, definitely. But we have this whole problem in all of sort of world society, that if a woman is to participate in any role of teaching or chanting or anything, it's one of the reasons why women don't pick the mridanga up,
mm,
because they're like, well, I'm not really good. Well, Bhakta stupid blah blah picks the fucking mridanga up and starts to play it on like day one, and you're like, Jesus
right.
Christ, I've been a
Yeah.
devotee for 25 years and I don't feel like I should touch the kartals. In
Hmm.
addition to which, if you visit any temple in the world, there is a basket of kartals and some mridangas and some harmoniums on the men's side.
All on the men's side. Yeah,
So
yeah,
you
yeah.
literally have to go through like this horrible sexual object. Maybe you're Mataji, maybe you're old enough, maybe you're lucky to be
Hmm.
old enough and to be not considered a sexual object anymore. And actually, I was advised early on in my Krishna consciousness, never dye your hair, because once you get gray hair, you'll have freedom to practice Krishna consciousness.
Mm. I
Don't
wish
dye
somebody
the
had told
hair.
me that.
I know. And I was like, that's good advice, but I realize how messed up it is now, because it's like, once you're an old bag, you're good to go. But if you're like, happen to be not, hideous, then you're going to just be a distraction. So just stay in your lane, so
Hmm.
you don't even want to go over. I actually just went and bought my own kartals and madangas so I could teach myself. But there's this whole idea that if you want to just like do basic things that are considered like totally fine for like a brand new bhakta, like pray the Madanga, that you're like a radical, castrating feminist,
Hmm.
that you're just trying to eviscerate men because you want to like play the mridanga, you know what I mean? And I think that is improving. And I have to say that, you know, um, I am, I haven't lived in an ISKCON temple in a long time, but when I go back, I feel like there's still so much of that vibe happening. And that's one of the reasons why it's been kind of nice for me to find this, to be invited constantly by this sort of alternate spiritual society, not alternate, but like another sampradaya who I'm always invited by. There's no difference between the men and women. The women are leading all the chanting and organizing and playing the instruments, and there's just an absence of that. And it was like such a relief that I didn't have to like constantly focus on my body and I could just go freaking chant the mantras. I was like, whoa, what freedom! Imagine, So I just think our society would do well to actually adhere to our own philosophy and finally and totally just let go of this concept.
So
It
why do
doesn't
you
mean,
think it
yeah.
is that this other, sampradaya that you participate in and you're able to chant with and feel really comfortable in, what do you think, if you could put your finger on one difference between like us and them? And I say us loosely because I mean, it's funny too, because sorry, not to go off on another thing, but it's just interesting too. Like, I mean, I personally don't identify as an ISKCON devotee in the
Yeah.
sense that, I mean, anybody who knows me in terms of, who my guru is and whatever, like I just don't. And but it's hard as someone who, and I do air quotes, grew up in and as an ISKCON devotee, and I not in the sense that I'm like a second generation, but I joined also when I was, when I was 17 years old. And
Right. It's like,
I might as well be second generation in that sense, in the way that I was so young that I really did grow up in a way in ISKCON. And it's like, no matter what you do, no matter where you go, it's so hard to shake a lot of those things.
Fundamental to bhakti is sangha.
Mm-hmm.
It's fundamental.
Yeah.
We're meant to do satsang. We're meant to be in, sankirtan. It means chanting together. So and if you're to go to a temple, what temple are you going to go to?
Right.
And if you're going to go to a kirtan, what kirtan are you going to go to?
Mm-hmm.
So if there isn't an alternate place for you to go, you're going to want to, you want to get nourished. We all want to get nourished. And that's what kept me. That's what kept me from just, and there's so many fabulous devotees who don't have an attachment to suppressing other people based on their bodies. That's not in every, but unfortunately, there's a ton that do. So you always have to kind of tiptoe around them, and they are the loudest voices. That's the unfortunate part. But so for me, I just sort of like, through Mantralogy and running Mantralogy, I sort of got open to this wider kirtan world, and it was like such a relief, because suddenly I had a sangha, and I had a sangha who didn't, who weren't invested in suppressing me or subjugating me or requiring me to be totally different than I am. Personality, of course, is karmic and somewhat temporary, but born of all your collective experiences of many lifetimes. I found a society that wasn't investigated in the subjugation of half its members, basically. Yeah. And
so I think, so my original question, sorry, because I went off a little bit on a tangent, was what do you think that main difference is? Like, why do you think that they can have a very similar philosophy to ours? I would imagine it's very similar, if not the same. Yeah, the same, right? So then what is it that makes that difference? Like, what comes to my mind, and I could be completely off, and I don't know how to say it without maybe sounding the way it's going to sound, but like, was it just the way Prabhupada presented it? Is it because he made these, certain statements about women on one hand, and then also we're not the body on the other hand? Is that confusing to some people, in the sense that the people that feel the need to have that feeling of power over women, grasp onto that? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think there's, I think in addition to being attached to the roles of women from the 1800s, people are attached to having it still be exactly like the 1960s.
Right.
And for them, spiritual life was frozen in that time. And to be fair, Prabhupada was a very forward-thinking guru coming from India in the 1960s. Like, he gave women Brahmin initiation, and he did all sorts of empowering things for women for his time, place, and circumstance. So in some ways, Prabhupada was super incredibly empowering for women, but he had some scars also. And I know that's probably going to rub some people the wrong way, but he's writing in Vrindavan in the 1950s. And then, America was a place that didn't even let Asians into the country, because there was something called the Asian Exclusionary Act, which was only repealed like right before Prabhupada came. And so in 1965, they repealed this totally racist law that didn't let Indians into America. So it's a very different time frame and a very different, so Prabhupada's coming from that context. And then devotees wanted to preserve that context also, because they felt that context and that nugget of time most represents the honeymoon of their Krishna consciousness. It's like 60 years later, so more than a half a century. And I think we would do well to allow it to transform. And I love this whole like modern desi movement of like, if I want to cover my head, that's empowering. If I don't want to cover my head, that's empowering, because what's empowering is that I get to choose if my head is covered or my head isn't covered.
Right.
And it's like, it's sad, but that's actually what Western women too, and these Indian women who are living in the Western world, are we're all saying the same thing. Like, I want to have agency over myself. You know, it's the thing that we're all struggling with. And I think you could boil modern feminism down to that one thing. If I want to, you know, if, you know, and even, and this is definitely going to rub a lot of devotees the wrong way, but like, if I want to, you know, have sexual agency over my body, or if I want to decide my role, I want to decide my service, I want to decide my marriage status, all of those things, just like men have always gotten to choose those things. If I want to be, there's not even a true like celibate ashram for women in ISKCON. There's no brahmacharini ashram. It's like, okay, you can like hang out there till you get married, but you're definitely going to get married. And there was no even option for women. There was no real renounce. There's no like, you know, you were a widow, which meant
I
that
was just gonna say that. Yeah. I was just
you had a husband, you definitely had a husband, you needed a husband, you couldn't do without it, but then he died. And that's a really interesting thing, because there are some women who are like true renunciates, and like they got married because Prabhupada wanted, but as soon as they could get rid of the husband, they were like, bye-bye. And when the husband came crawling back to them because they really couldn't maintain celibacy or whatever, they were like, got the white on, so sorry, thanks, bye. Because they wanted to have the opportunity also to express themselves as celibates. And there aren't so many, you know, history shows that there's not so many true celibates, but there were some. And one of them was Mother Kalini, and she was like so relieved, you know, she didn't want to go back to her only attachment to marriage was her attachment to her guru, which is beautiful. She had so much guru nishta. So she, because of Prabhupada, but like, you know, when the opportunity came she became like a widow when she was like 25 or something. When the opportunity came just a few years later to going back to being a grihasta, she was like, she didn't want it. She told me. So I'm taking that from her own words, that she really wanted that. But still, you know, she was considered to be a widow. So we don't, you know, we don't have very many varied opportunities for women. And it's, you know, it's unfortunate that a huge segment of our society is more attached to having women subjugated than they are to focusing on the names or focusing on seva, or, you know, like, it's just, I expressed to someone who I thought was a good friend how sad and heartbroken I felt that even though the thing that I love to do the most for Krishna is to sing, that I would never in this lifetime, not once, ever, have the opportunity to lead a kirtan at Krishna Balaram Mandir. And it literally devolved into, well, if women do that, this is not made up, and this person actually did delete all of our messages off of Facebook, so I couldn't screenshot it, which I wasn't fast enough to do. If women, the word that was used was, they should expect to essentially be, the word was raped. So what it tells me is that there's enough men in our society. Oh, and that person's wife agreed. So what it tells me is that we've internalized the worst type of sexism, and it threads through our society in a way that is actually very harmful, not just to women, but to men too, because the man seeing a woman chanting at the ISKCON temple, for them, their thought would go towards sexual violence is really quite shocking. It's really quite shocking that it's really real.
Yeah, that's
and
sad.
That's real, and that really happened. And I hate to, hang on one second.
Yeah,
Just
sure.
because I am a mom, my kids are texting me.
No problem.
And that's the interesting, you know, thing, that it goes to those extremes. I mean, some of us are just like, can you just call me my name, Annette Mataji, because I'm 19. I don't really want to be I'm
Yeah,
not.
I mean, so do you know, I don't know how, and we didn't really talk about it too much before either. I don't know how familiar you are with kind of what led to kind of
Well,
me.
I know there was this thing that some women wanted to just be called Prabhu.
Yeah, okay. So just quick, I'll give you like the quick, like the Cliff Notes version. So yeah, so there was
Like
apparently, I
even
don't,
the fact that there was like a whole discussion about us chanting Radha too much.
oh my
I was like, you really, you're so terrified
God. Yeah, I
of the
can't.
feminine that you don't
Yeah,
want us to.
yeah,
Like if we chant Radha too much, that might be too. That might be feminine. It might be an expression of feminism.
yeah. Well,
Anyway,
yeah. Yeah.
namaste.
So anyway, yeah, I can't, that's a whole, oh my God, I could go off on that for like for forever. You know, and I don't know what it is. I think it's just my like innate, like, I don't know, rebellious nature, but I remember specifically when that resolution came out, thinking to myself, all right, well, this is now all I'm going to chant because you're not going to tell
Right.
me that I can't do it. But anyway, so yeah, okay. So there was, I don't know who these two devotees are, but there was a, you know, like I guess a male and a female devotees
I'm
on some,
listening. I'm just plugging my computer in.
that's fine, on some call or something, and he and the, I want to say he was like a boy. I think they were young. I don't mean to like, I don't mean that in like a demasculating way, but anyway, he called the girl, the woman, female, whatever, Mataji, and she said, please don't call me Mataji. She was like 17 years old. And so he immediately like quoted some like something verse or something from like
Chanakya
Chanakya
Pandit.
Pandit. Yeah. And like, and it became like a meme. And so then it was submitted to this like whatever account, this ISKCON, like ISKCON meme account or whatever. And it got posted and people went crazy. So then this other devotee uh like posted on Facebook this like paragraph explanation from someone else and said, you know, oh, I saw somebody posted this. I can't help but disagree. And the whole thing was basically this man saying how if he wants to call you Mataji, you need to suck it up because it's not about you, the Mataji, it's about him, and how using that term reminds him that you're not a sexual object. And if he calls you by your name or Prabhu, then he will definitely want to have sex with you.
And you kind of go like, that's all you got, buddy? Like that's your level of advancement? Like
Yeah.
maybe you need to work on like because what's upsetting about all of that to me is most ISKCON devotees work in the world, men and women all the time, and like other men outside of ISKCON are perfectly able to just like work with you. It's
Yeah.
like fine. So it's clearly achievable. So so I feel like what happens is these very base like issues with men and women get exacerbated and you know oil gets poured on the fire of this like really base really lowly anartas that none of us need to have.
Mm,
And it's shocking and it's sad because we're all here like in America in 2020 and we're like able to like work with men and we're able to like drive around and then we're like we're actually saying that men are like just these like completely out of control monsters of sexual urge and violence, you know, even
mm-hmm.
violence
Right.
against women, and that none of them can be controlled except if they use these, except
Oh
there's this
yeah, that
magic
it's
word that just
it's a
totally
magic
changes
word.
their psychology. But really, it's just about control. And I wish we could
Right.
just be honest and say, we're just afraid of losing control. Like the
It's
fact
not, but I would argue though that it's not just control. I think it's also about just taking responsibility for yourself. Like, how
that
about if you're having that urge, you need to think about why you're having that urge and what it says about you, not
it's
about
not
the
even in the realm of normal urges. Like, I don't think it's
right.
even
Yeah.
normal.
Like
It's
you,
like, it's deviant almost. Like, I mean, I hate to use that word because that's fraught with so many issues, and my kids would be like, Mom. But
no, but I understand what you're
because, like,
saying.
if you can't be in the room, like, we're not, we're in a society where genders totally mix and where we're even
Hmm.
dissolving the concept of gender. So
Hmm.
why are we clinging to this? And one could argue that Indian society has always had ashrams where gender was dissolved because we know
Mm.
there are. But why are we clinging to this concept that women are objects and men are these like out of control, like violent sexual beasts? Like we're not. That's not
Mm-hmm.
really what we are. And if you're saying that's what we are, then I feel like there's another motivation. I'm sure there are some unhealthy, psychologically unhealthy people that are like that, but by and large, we're mostly able to kind of be with each other and even not think of, and if you look at our greater society, the people that can't do that are the people that I would argue we probably don't want to invite into our society, into our
Mm.
ashrams, into our temples, because they're they're people that you know are prone toward or philosophical conservatism in a way that doesn't actually go with bhakti, because
Right,
bhakti
but that
is a love.
seems to right, but that
So,
seems
so
to
like,
be a large
yeah.
percentage of the society, right? Because I mean, I just think I I actually feel like sometimes I know for as liberal minded as I'd like to think that I am, although I'm probably not the most liberal minded. I'm sure there's people that are way more like what would be considered liberal than I am. But
Yeah.
at the same time, like when I think of so many people that I know and when I really know them, like, and I talk to them, like, I feel like maybe in terms of devotees, I know more that are actually insanely conservative.
Well, religious people, the psychology of a lot of
Yeah.
religious people is if you study all religions, the more the more religious, like if you were to look at Jews and you look at Reform Jews, not very conservative, men and women do whatever, blah blah blah. Women are rabbis. The more you get toward orthodoxy in any
Mm-hmm.
religion, the more women are subjugated. So
Right.
you can be like, a modern, Islamic woman, like what is the name of that congresswoman? And she's or Senate, I can't remember her name. The
I know
beautiful,
who I
yeah,
can picture her, but yeah, I don't remember her name either.
and and she's like Somali or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so not she's serving in politics, right? And you have like Indira Gandhi, or you have like these different, um, you have these different women who are more and in fact, every time society has a chance to sort of progress philosophically, it tends to move away from fanatical religious practices. But if you go toward anything like Orthodox Jews, like
Mm-hmm.
we have a lot of Orthodox Jews in our family, because my family is Jewish, or a lot of the members of my family are Jewish, and the Orthodox Jews, like, they voted for Donald Trump
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That's huge. Mm-hmm.
because for them religion has a lot to do with fear and hatred.
Mm.
And so they feel like they're expressing fear. They feel like he represents that, so they like it. And that's the same in ISKCON. So as we go toward, and then you have these like wild liberal, wonderful, like for me, just bhaktas that are like just really loving and accepting. Now, I would argue that if bhakti means love and devotion, I don't know how you merge that with the hard, the sort of like the hard orthodoxy of what
Mm-hmm.
some of what ISKCON looks like. And,
But I
and
think that's the thing too, is there has to be an
I don't mind.
acceptance.
Anyone can do that. It just bothers me that those people are in charge.
Oh yeah, I
So
mean,
for
but
me, that's the problem. Not like, if okay, so there's gonna be fanatical right wing Orthodox people like in any religion, but it's like I feel like the 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 other side is just grossly mis or underrepresented,
but
and
you
that
know
could
what
be
though?
really the fix for it. Or
I
the fix is we just don't give a shit. Like
oh
that's been my fix, and I just get out my damn harmonium and start to chant. And like, I inherited Mother Kalini's Giri Raj.
mm-hmm.
At least 10 men have told me that I'm basically going to go to hell because I'm not qualified to worship Giri Raj.
Because
Because
of
I
your
never
like
went down an
initiation.
initiation and
Yeah, I
will
was gonna
never
say
get
because of
an initiation in ISKCON because I can't
right,
get it.
right.
And second, because they just decided that. and, and I thought, I was actually scared. I was actually a little scared. Like, is this going to like, And then it was like she gave him to me.
Yeah, I mean, come
I
on.
thought
Like,
I'm just, and it was funny because I had no idea how to worship Guru Raj. And the first thing that happened was I went to her house to do some, to clean up after she left her body.
hmm,
And literally on the dresser was this note card that said, "How to worship Guru Raj."
I just got like chills.
Yeah.
Oh,
And then this is a little bit of a secret, but I'm saying it totally publicly. So then I never got Brahmin initiation. So I open up her Bhagavad Gita, and this piece of paper falls into my lap. And it has the Gayatri mantra on it.
oh
That's
my
really
God.
happened.
Well,
So I mean,
I would argue, I would argue that she was 100% your guru anyway. I mean,
yeah.
as obviously,
My
I
own
don't.
guru, actually, my own initiating guru, his Ram Swami, actually told me, "Why don't you just get initiated by Mother Kalini?" Before I got initiated by him, and it was like I would have, but it wasn't happening. So I
Right.
had to. But it's
Yeah.
funny because he literally said that. Why don't you just ask her? But it wasn't happening, so I didn't.
Yeah. How would you anyway? In the sense of
But
like,
she wasn't gonna do. I mean, it was interesting because she was also like my mom and like my best friend and stuff. So I'd be like
yeah,
sleeping in her room on the floor, like, "Hey, can you give me an initiation?" Like it was like so
yeah.
formalized. So, but it's just
Yeah.
interesting. So,
No,
so
I would argue you got second from her. I mean, I know that's kind of
okay,
totally
that's like yeah.
speculative and not my decision to make, but I would
Well,
say,
it
I
was
mean, oh
just
my,
funny how it all happened like that. I was like, is
yeah,
this like
like,
a cosmic joke or is this a cosmic arrangement? So it's just interesting. And then I just decided, like, for myself, and this is just very personal, like, I just had to go forward. And then I just started to teach at places, like, instead of teaching at, like, the temple, I just started to teach at, like, Kripalu. Or, like, I started to, like, instead of playing the Madunga, like, at the temple or something, which I would have loved to do. And I probably would be really good at it by now if I hadn't been so timid and so felt like it was like I shouldn't. I started to play Madunga for other devotees and for Nina, and like, I have like an outlet. So I've been given this other outlet, and it's totally satisfying, fulfilling. And the end result of it is I reject nothing that came from Prabhupada at all because I
right.
felt like I wouldn't know about it. And then I have this other way to express it. And I do a little bit avoid certain temples because when I walk in there, it brings back so many awful, harsh
Mm.
feelings of like the previous times I spent where like I felt kind of uninvited to the table or the
Yeah,
whatever.
I mean, it's so funny, like when just you telling, just about Giriraj and the the mantra falling out, and then even just where, in terms of like your own, I guess for lack of a better word, like the well, no, I'll say the teaching. I was going to say preaching, but like the teaching that you do, because I think that's probably more accurate in the sense of like when we use the word preaching, it's like this idea that you're trying to like grab people and convert them. When I think
Right.
really, I would say probably more what you do is in terms
I
of
teach,
teaching,
yeah.
yeah, teaching, exploring, discussing, and
Yeah. And
what
it's wonderful and it's effective and it suits me. And
I just want to
the
say,
thing
like,
is, if you look at all of the women, if you look at all of the senior Prabhupada women,
mhm,
so Yamuna, if you
yeah,
look at Vishaka, Mother Kalini, Rukmini, all these women, Jagacharini, that we looked up to because they didn't have a role on the Vyasasan, they weren't doing that. Their teaching by example is incredibly profound. And they never, because they never had any like opportunity for like position or whatever, they
mhm.
never got sucked into the ego downfalls or the pitfalls of that. And so I would argue that now there's if you really want to look at what are the qualities of a devotee as described like in the Narada Bhakti Sutras or something, they embody that absolutely, and they don't have any like of these like ahankars of position or fame or disciples or any of that, and they had to just do it for themselves. Like no one authorized Mother Kalini to go Verdun, and well, actually, someone gave her the Giriraj. That's now our little tiny baby Giriraj. Nobody authorized her to do that. She just had to decide to do it. Nobody,
Mm.
she didn't. Nobody, sort of told Jagattarini like become this amazing creator of miniature Krishna conscious worlds. She just did it out of her own creative propensity. Or Mother Yamuna's cookbook is like, it's literally like it's like a manifesto of like Indian cooking for the Western world. Like, so all of these women, and eventually, like, you can see that the nobody said like, Achuta, you should learn to chant. She just did it, and she's so damn good that everyone wants her. And everybody sees her as this like, spiritual teacher. Really, for me, she's a teacher. I see her chant, and I think she just went on ahead and did it, and so I think
she did it. I think. I mean, again, I don't want to speak for her, but I would say like she did it despite those things.
it's all despite. But
Yeah.
I did get one very good teaching on the side of Govardhan Hill by a very advanced teacher in Krishna consciousness who gave himself sannyas.
Okay.
Kesava Bharati, I'll just say it.
Okay.
And he said to us, we were having this marvelous day walking around Govardhan, and he said, it's easier to get forgiven than it is to get permission.
Oh.
And I took that teaching to heart, 100%.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I think we just have to kind of go forward with that, and and that's been, I think that's what we can do, as members of the society now. And basically, if I like you and you call me Mataji, I won't punch you in the face. If I don't, then it's just
Thank you for that.
The worst part is I go to like London to play with 108, and all these people are like, I'm a freaking badass, play a metal guitar, and then these like devotee, like Krishna core kids are like calling me Mataji. I'm like, I didn't come to London for that. Please, like, can you just for 1 second see me not as your mother? Like, I'd be like, you're not my kid. I'm not raising you. You're my age. You're older than me. I'm not your mother. And my whole value isn't just motherhood. I have other things to offer, So I think that women need to be able to not just be only seen in their role of everyone's mom. Like, oh my God, no. I'm not like cutting crusts off sandwiches backstage or something. I'm like, so it was just interesting.
You're not eternally lactating.
No, I wasn't. Although I have.
I just wanted to say the one thing I was going to say before was just in terms of just hearing, all those stories in terms like Giriraj and the Gayatri mantra and stuff, and just, kind of seeing in a way like how I mean, at least from the outside, I don't know, from the outside looking in, like you seem to really thrive in the, kind of those, the yoga community and the, other sampradaya or whatever, that, it just seems like Krishna really, I think he's,
it's probably he watched.
I like to speculate, but I think, I think he's into it. I don't know.
Yeah,
he doesn't talk to me directly, but
I think what I realize is that, and this will be kind of how we wrap it up. But what I realize is that sometimes you misinterpret all of the lessons that Krishna is laying before you. So in my mind, Krishna was asking me for more surrender and more open-heartedness and more letting go of this and letting go of that. But really what I think my lesson was to become brave, to learn how to set boundaries and learn how to like stride forward on my own. And it was like, once I figured that out, that there was always this like, I could go to the right or I could go to the left. I was always going to the right, and it wasn't the way I was supposed to be going. I just misinterpreted it, and it was sucking all the life out of me, and it was making me not want to be a devotee. And it was, once I realized that the lesson what I was trying to learn was how to make boundaries, but lovingly, how to like, speak for myself, how to decide what I was doing, how to go forward, how to study regardless of the fact that I may never teach, blah, blah, blah. All of a sudden, the whole thing kind of burst open. And a huge, huge part of that, honestly, was really being in the company of people like Nina Rao, who did that. And her, her whole group of people like Ambika and Shaman, and they all just went to India with nobody, no society, and and their guru was Siddhima, and Siddhima literally was a total, and she was Ma. She was, she embraced this mother role, but, and it was like, how like it says in the Samsara prayers, like the spiritual master will offer 4 kinds of foods. Siddhi Ma used to like make them food for their journey. Like their guru would make them food for their journey home. She would like, she would make them like little sandwiches and things like that. And I thought, wow, isn't that just amazing that, you know, like there's power in that too,
Yeah.
you know, and that's when I mean, I kind of hope we can come full circle and embrace that and understand that I just saw this amazing thing by Zadie. Wait, who wrote Autograph Man? Who wrote the book Autograph Man? She's a famous writer, but she wrote something. She wrote, and it's a quote, and she says like, we shouldn't like with through feminism, we shouldn't start to think that these amazing roles of women as mothers or as people that cook or people that sew, none of those traditional feminine arts mean nothing. You know, if you see like Frida Kahlo, they have her paintings at the Met or at the different, like the Boston Museum of Art, but they also have her clothing because that was how she expressed herself. And so for me, it's come all the way around full circle. If I want to be called Mataji and completely dress up as a gopi, then I get to do that. And that can be my expression of feminism too. And, you know, so and this is the thing that I've been kind of coming back to again and again. It's having agency. And that's the thing that's been missing for us. And we're ready for it and we want it and we're taking it. And that's the end of it, you know, and in our, you know, I actually kind of didn't want to wear saris for a while because I thought, no, that's like, I'm getting forced into this feminine role. That's not me. And now I'm just like, I need 20,000 yards of fabric. Because for me, it's changed and shifted. And it's by my choice. And that's when it's really, you know, that's when it seems to start really becoming empowering and it makes Krishna consciousness like this beautiful opening lotus that we could there's petals for all of us. So,
well, on
so
that
thanks.
note,
Thank you. The first episode of Off the Altar.
Off the Altar.